Today, I'm going to be going over the combat system that I've been working on. It is still a work in progress, but the one thing that I wanted to focus on was keeping it fast paced and making every movement, every action, every reaction something that mattered. You know, a lot of the times in games, you're kind of sitting there waiting for somebody else to take their turn, or you're kind of bored and there's not a lot of back and forth. So that's one thing that I'm really trying to focus on is create that back and forth where everybody feels engaged during combat and they're not necessarily waiting to take their turn. Moving into the combat, the one thing I really wanted to focus on was designing the combat to feel dangerous and not complicated. A lot of the times there are too many modifiers where you're kind of in paralysis where you have to take time to actually count up all your modifiers or abilities, whatever it is. I want to try to make it as streamlined and fluid as fast as possible and a whole lot of fun. While it is still strategic, I don't want the math or anything else to kind of take you out of the combat. I want it to stay immersive. So the first thing that I really focused on was every hit matters. So the health pool is relatively low. Um, it's about 20 HP, and then the damage scale is 1 to 8. So essentially, you could have 4, 5, even 3 hits could take you out in combat. Now, there are some things like tactical equipment you can use, you know, stim packs, all that stuff that can kind of keep you in the fight long. And I'm not going to get into AV and all that stuff. Those are a lot of details. I'm just going to focus on the notes today. And then as I start locking things in, I'll kind of go more into detail. I did do a lot of testing over the weekend, and I want to make sure that everything is kind of solidified, not necessarily solidified, but more in place before I discuss it more into detail. There is no damage stacking, like I said before. Modifiers are not in the game. I use alternative methods like advantage, additional d20 on a rule of d20 or whatever it is, and then fast resolution. So I want to make it fast. And I'm going to reiterate that down the road, making sure that we're not spending time calculating things. You know, it's your damage die and then move on, right? Reactions. So the reactions are the biggest thing. In my intro, I talked about combat feeling fluid where you're not sitting and waiting to take a turn, you're going back and forth. So the combat is really you attack and they react. You attack, they react. Now reactions don't stack. You get one reaction per turn and then you're kind of stuck. I did try a primary and a secondary action where it was primary reaction, secondary reaction, but we weren't necessarily using the secondary action, and it actually ended up causing you wanting to do like chain reactions. So they attacked you, you reacted, then they reacted, then you reacted. That kind of ended up being the organic flow, which I don't necessarily want all of that back and forth, so we ended up cutting that. But that is kind of like the summary. I am still testing it. I would love to do a combat test here in a few like a week or two. I don't want to confirm that, but really focusing on walking people through combat because it is getting very good. And I think that if I can display it, it'll be a lot easier than me just talking about it. Now, I think that pretty much summarizes today. Is kind of short and quick. The more I kind of develop, the longer I'll probably talk, but today can be kind of brief. You know, like I said, I don't want combat where damage kind of stacks endlessly. And I didn't want modifiers in this combat. I just want it to feel fluid and easy to understand, but making it have a large impact as well and being tactical, which is, it can be kind of challenging. So, you know, instead of scaling numbers, I'm designing around the impact and the consequences with clear outcomes. So fewer hits, but those hits have a high impact. Now I'll be stress testing here in a little bit. I'll probably end up doing a few more playthroughs, and then I'd like to showcase the combat.